The other thing we were trying to say, what does it make you think of? And interesting, the name chapel, lots of people responded saying it sounds small and restrictive and exclusive. So the arty hipsters, they were like, well, that sounds cool. But that is not the majority of people that our church family connect with.
Welcome to Independence, the FIEC podcast. And we're on the road this week. We're actually in Norwich. Thank you. This is Andy Rees, who's the pastor of Surrey Chapel, which is not in Surrey.
No.
We're in Norwich. We'll come to that in a moment. Thank you very much for having us. Just tell us a little bit, Andy, about yourself and the church.
Yeah. So I'm married to Grace, got 3 little girls, 10-year-old and 8-year-old.
3 girls. We could have a podcast about raising girls, you and I.
I need some coaching.
Our youngest is 18.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so we've got 28 and 26, 25 and 18.
Yeah.
So we've got a few tips for you,
which
is basically despair is all that is ahead. Anyway, sorry, you've got 3 girls.
No, that's fine. I'm planning to build a shed, I think, in my teenage year. I'm going to spend a lot of time there.
Yeah, shed is a good investment, yeah, absolutely. And tell us about the church.
Yeah, so I've been the pastor here at Surrey Chapel for 3 years, started sort of 7 months before the pandemic hit. And so it's been quite an intriguing time to be the first time as the senior pastor in a church.
Sure, and actually over pandemic, you've done a bit of work because I can see, around us, we're sitting in the main auditorium. Yeah. It's been spruced up.
Yeah.
No pictures of the outside.
No.
Okay, less said about the outside, the better. But you've made the place look smart. And tell us what was the thinking behind that?
Well, just in the first lockdown, we just thought we're not going to get an opportunity as good as this again to transform the inside. To be fair, we had not touched the inside of the church for a very long time. It looked like a 1970s Best Western hotel. And for people coming into the church, it just didn't new people coming to the church, it just wasn't very warm.
Some people listening, 1970s Best Western hotel, that might be the height of their architectural interior decor ambitions. Right. So just tell us what that means.
What does it mean? I mean, I'm just trying to pay, it looked a little bit like an old people's home that hadn't been touched for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now it's smart. You've got a new carpet, painted the walls, put electronics in.
Yes, all of that. We've made it just a clean, welcoming space. Downstairs, we've put a bunch of sofas. So we wanted to make it more relational place. We wanted to open up rooms so they could be used for ministry, Bible ministry. We wanted it to be a place that non-Christians would come in and not be put off by the decor. Think, actually, this is a nice place to be.
So this is almost a different podcast, but I think actually, I've not been here before.
Right.
Well, I've seen some pictures.
Yeah.
So I think actually what you've done with essentially a limited space.
Yes.
You've actually spent some money and really made it feel welcoming and a bit brighter, vibrant. Right. We're here on a very hot day, which is why we're sitting here in shorts.
Yeah.
You've put air conditioning in.
Yeah.
And just things that will make people feel comfortable and welcome. So I think that's another podcast.
Right.
We'll come back to it another time, because actually making people feel welcome at church, feeling at ease, feeling comfortable. That's really important, isn't it?
Oh, it's a huge thing. You just think for someone to walk across the threshold is a big thing, right? That's a big thing, particularly if they're not used to coming into a building like this, because they're just thinking, what am I going to expect? What's it going to be like? And to come into a place...
Especially if they've seen the outside.
Well, exactly. And actually, if you get to see the outside of Surrey Chapel, it is pretty special. We're going to try and spruce that up. But coming in, being able to go, oh, right, this is normal. This is actually not just normal, it's actually quite a nice place to be. And it's interesting, upstairs, since we've spruced up this space, it was never used apart from Sundays. Now we clear out the chairs. So it's used for midweek youth, it's used for mum and, the sort of smarties, the toddler group, parent and toddler group. And it just I think it all helps with the great goal of people hearing about Christ.
Yeah. And which, of course, is the thing, isn't it? We mustn't get so obsessed with buildings that we forget there's an ultimate aim, which is to share Christ with people.
Right.
We want people to respond, don't we, in faith, and be baptised. Now, we're here actually not to talk about church building, but church name. So this is might seem like a quite niche podcast, but it's quite an interesting story. So Surrey Chapel, actually one of the original members of FIEC. You knew that, didn't you?
Yeah.
So November 1922, there were, I think, 7 churches and 10 mission halls.
Yeah.
Of the 7 churches, 3 are still in the FIEC and still exist.
Yeah.
And Surrey Chapel is one of them.
Yeah.
So you've been in the FIEC for all of its 100 years. It's our 100-year anniversary. So congratulations.
Hey, look,
Happy
I'll
birthday
take that.
And all of that. But it begs the question, why on earth is Surrey Chapel called Surrey Chapel? given that we're in Norwich.
Right. I know. And that is the big question. When I was looking at this job and someone said, look at this job, Surrey Chapel, I thought, where is it? I could not believe it was in Norwich.
You thought it was a leafy suburb somewhere.
Oh, man.
You thought you were going to Guildford.
Yeah, I thought it was Guildford. That is absolutely right. I couldn't believe it was in Norwich. So Surrey Chapel is called Surrey Chapel because it was historically on Surrey Street, which is...
So was it in a different place to here?
Yeah, well, it was sort of probably about a 15-minute walk into town.
Okay, so significantly away from where it is now.
Yes.
So there's a church in Leicester called Carley, which is not in Carley.
Right.
But it's called Carley because that's where the church was originally.
Yes.
And it was moved by developers. They kept the name, moved from the place. So similar. Yeah,
that's exactly it. And I think they had toyed when they moved here in the 1980s. So they sold the old building and the vicarage. Oh, it wasn't. It was the manse. To John Lewis, and there's a lovely car park there now.
Shop rather than a man.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
It was the shop. And so they bought this building, but obviously there was so much emotion tied up. I think they did toy with, do we change the name? But they thought there was a significant value in the name back in the 1980s that they didn't want to mess with it.
Right, okay. Now, it's interesting you talk about church names because actually the church here and the church where I'm an elder have this in common. We've both changed our name, or you're about to change your name. We'll come back to that in a moment. Ours has been quite a subtle change. You're going for a more significant change, which you can tell us about. But I've got here, you might be wondering why I've got a bit of paper in my hand if you're watching the video rather than listening online. If you're listening online, there you go, a bit of paper. And you might wonder what this bit of paper is. This is a list of all the churches in the FIEC, 630 churches and church plants in the FIEC. And I thought I would just do a little exercise. I knew I was coming here yesterday to see what the most popular names are.
Right.
Okay, interesting?
Great.
Now you've seen the answers already, so I'm not going to kind of quiz you on it. But most of the popular names are, it won't surprise people to know, Grace Church. There are 33 Grace churches in the FIEC, and they're nearly all new. There are 17 Emmanuels.
Wow.
There's obviously only one Emmanuel, but there are 17 Emmanuel churches. There are 17 Christ churches, which is what our church is. Yeah. So it's quite sort of up there in the top of the pops. 16 Hopes, 15 Trinities, which is divisible by 3. It's got a sort of treat about it. And then the first old name comes up at number 12, Bethel. There are 12 Bethels. 9 Cornerstones, 6 New Lifes, 6 Ebenezers. I think you can never have enough Ebenezers. 5 Redeemers, and then a few other sort of odd bits and bobs. There are no Zor Baptist chapels, but as we've just been walking around the city, and I saw a Zor Baptist chapel. I once pastored a Zor Baptist chapel. It changed its name.
Right.
And one of the reasons it changed its name is because Zor means little or insignificant, which is not a great name for a church. Anyway. But by far and away, the 2 biggest actually are none of those names. They are either a place and an evangelical church.
Right.
So just looking down the list here, Alverstoke Evangelical Church, the name of a place, an evangelical church. There are 193 of those.
Wow.
Though fewer than there used to be.
Right.
Because I think people are realising that evangelical doesn't quite sort of have the sort of same understanding in society. There are 51 community churches.
Right.
So, for example, Abbeyfield Community Church, they're at the top of my list. So there you go. So you're changing your name.
Yes.
Tell us first of all what to.
Yeah. So we are changing it to CityGates Church. Norwich.
Hang on. You will be the only CityGates, plural.
Yeah.
CityGates Church. Why? So CityGates Church Norwich. Why CityGates? Well, first of all, why not Surrey Chapel?
Right. So this, this has been a long process. So it's been, because this is, the name is dear, particularly to older saints in the church.
Sure, it's got a long history. So lots of people who have not even been here know of Surrey Chapel, know some of the things that God has done here in the past.
Right. That is right. And that is having to weigh all those issues up. The value of the name as it has meant historically within evangelicalism, or people who've heard of Surrey Chapel because of its significance, some of the ministry here, weighing up that cultural value today, weighing the cultural value within our city. It's been a long process to work out changing the name. 2 years trying to bring the church family with us. Why did we tackle it? It's because I think the thing we found is that Surrey Chapel doesn't mean anything to people in our city. And when you hear the name Surrey Chapel, there are 2 elements to that name. Surrey, obviously, is not, as we were bantering earlier, It is.
So it's not even the street it's on at the moment.
No. I mean, we're on Bottoff Street at the moment. We don't want to be called Bottoff Building. So we decided we weren't going to go there.
Okay.
So
there's not even that connection.
No, there's not a geographical connection. And even the sort of, we got our church family to ask their friends, we got gone to ask their friends 2 questions. Had they heard of Surrey Chapel? And what does the name make them think of?
Okay, it's good. That's a great idea. So it wasn't just kind of, we're going to do this.
No. Getting
people involved, because presumably for a lot of the congregation, that's where the real heart connection to the name was.
Yes.
So what were the responses to those 2 questions?
Well, it was a brilliant question to get people to ask, because actually we found there was the only people who had heard of Surrey Chapel were people who their friends had actually told, I go to this church, Surrey Chapel.
Okay.
But then probably probably about 2/3 of people, a third of people said, why do you go to church in Surrey? Okay.
That is a long commute.
It is a long commute. I mean, that is not believing in the local congregation, is it? So they said they'd not heard of Surrey Chapel.
So a third of people said, assume that you went to church in Surrey.
Right,
okay.
Yeah. And so that was one thing that just came up. But basically, people had not heard of us. We were not visibly present. We weren't going to lose some capital within Norwich by changing our name.
So even people who are walking past the door don't necessarily register, this is Surrey Chapel.
No, not at all. And actually it is because our outside of a building is a little bit invisible, and so we need to spruce it up. So that we weren't going to lose anything there. And I guess the other thing we were trying to say, what does it make you think of? And interesting, the name chapel, lots of people responded saying it sounds small and restrictive and exclusive. So the arty hipsters, they were like, well, that sounds cool. But that is not the majority of people that our church family connect with. So the name chapel was a little bit confused to them. So we wanted to get the name church. And, that, if you like, that opened the door for people within the church say, okay, our name, if we change the name within our city at least, we're not really going to lose anything in terms of capital that we've built up over years of reputation.
But you've chosen a name which is more than just a place. So tell us first of all about why CityGates. What's the connection there?
So there is
CityGate. People might think, CityGate.
Yeah.
By the gate of the city. But your CityGates.
Yeah.
So immediately
plural.
Getting me thinking, hang on, what's going on there?
Yeah, that's interesting. So the plurality is the fact that we are quite close to 2 historic city gates.
Okay.
So that, there's
Have they got names?
They have, but I don't know. They're not on the tip of my fingers.
You failed, I'm afraid.
Okay. Oh, that's right. There are 12. There were historically 12 city gates, so you could read into that. But we're quite close to 2.
So just on that, forgive me for interrupting.
Go on.
We've walked around the city.
Yeah.
It strikes me as a place where history actually of that kind is pretty important.
Yes, it is.
You showed me the castle.
Yeah.
Old churches. I drove in along the wall.
Yes, you're right.
So actually, is there a sense in which the gates, the whole kind of history of Norwich and its kind of having walls and a castle, that's quite important to people?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
So we've tried to go something which is a historic connection with Norwich.
Right.
That is a historic connection with Norwich. Now, obviously, there's lots biblically we can riff off in terms of city gates. As what happened in the Old Testament is where announcement of great victory occurred. It's the place where people went to discuss the issues of the day. I mean, there's in terms of that metaphor, there's a lot we can use.
The elders could meet by the front door and take their shoes off and swap them with one another.
Right. So, I'm up for that because some of them have got quite smart shoes. So we could absolutely all of that. But then also in terms of city gates, why else we attracted to that? It's, as you say, there's not many churches that have that name. So we've been like, if someone Googles CityGates Church, we'll be one of the churches that come up. So there's a Google kind of factor to that as well. It was also fairly neutral and unoffensive, so we thought actually it probably will date okay. So we've tried to think about a number of different aspects. And for a church family that have loved the name Surrey Chapel, they've received it very positively. So, the church, it got voted through unanimously, amazingly.
So you've got this double thing going on really, that you've got a missional objective.
Right.
Because you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, actually how we're perceived, how we're known, how we make ourselves known. That's really important. That's not the gospel.
No.
But we want people, faith comes by hearing.
Right.
So we want people to hear the gospel. We want them to come to stuff, to find us, to search us out, to be welcome when they come in. In a way, it's connected all with the refurbishment of the building.
Yes.
But at the same time, you've landed on a name which actually is serving people who are in the church, because there's a significance to it. Right?
Yes.
It's not just a nostalgia name. It's actually saying, there's something about these words that have some sort of biblical meaning that we can talk to people about. And actually, that's very similar to what we've done. So let me tell you about our change.
Go on.
Which may seem very, very minor, but actually I think it's quite significant for us. So we were ChristChurch Market Harborough. And radically, we've changed our name to ChristChurch Harborough. Okay. Which is such a significant change that we didn't bother changing it with the Charity Commission. With the Charity Commission, you can change to an operating name. So that's our operating name. So the charity is still called ChristChurch Market Harborough, but the church is ChristChurch Harborough. And you might think, doesn't seem very brave or ambitious, or why even have you done it? But interestingly, it was about the same two things. It's about serving people in the church and about reaching people who are outside the church. So Market Harborough is a market town, about 25,000 people, growing significantly. And it's in Harborough district. So Market Harborough is the town. Harborough district is the district it's in. And Harborough district is made up of Market Harborough, another smaller town right on the other edge of the district called Lutterworth, and then about 99 villages. And these villages are all not all of them, but many of them are chocolate box, little sort of villages with Georgian rectories, places that people love to live. And if you live in one of these villages, you're quite pleased that you don't live in Market Harborough. That's the town, right? You might go there for shops, you might go there for the doctors, you might go there for schools, but actually you're pretty pleased that you live in Foxton or Lubenham or Husbands Bosworth, whatever it may be. And about half our church live in the town, half don't. So we realised we've actually got a church name which is basically saying we're about the town. But half the people in the church don't come from the town. And the people that we're trying to reach, their neighbours, their friends, are quite pleased they're not in the town. So it's kind of this strange thing going on. You might think it's just, come on, get over it. But actually these things do matter, don't they? And if we're putting up barriers to people kind of just engaging with us at that first level that we don't need to, why are we doing that? It doesn't make sense. So we've changed it to ChristChurch Harborough and said basically we're not just a church for the town, we're a church for the district.
Right.
And I think that's more welcoming to people who don't live in the town, whether they are members of the church, feel a bit more part of it, or whether in fact they are people that we want to try and reach.
Right.
So it much less painful for us than it is for you. Not obviously a long history.
No.
But some of the same ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you've got to think about in church life, isn't it? You've got to think about what's serving the gospel, what's serving believers.
And actually, when you think about that, and the name is the first point of contact with your church. Actually, probably the person is, the individual will be the first, but for a lot of people, it'll be the name. That's the first thing they come into contact with about your church.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, we need to be perhaps sometimes less precious about names, do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, it can be painful, but we need to think carefully about it, and maybe we do.
Yeah. So interestingly, before I was at Market Harborough, lived in East London and went along to East London Tabernacle Baptist Church, ELT Baptist Church, which we all call the Tab. And what was interesting about it is I never really liked that name. I didn't like it theologically. It had, for some Christians, it had great association, of course, with Spurgeon, which is when it was started, really. But theologically, I'm thinking, I don't really want to call a church a tabernacle. But interestingly, everybody local knew the building, right in the centre of Mile End. Everybody in the locality knew the building. Everybody local called it the Tab. And I've been there for a few months, really, and my neighbour said to me, where do you go to church? I said, I go to East London Tabernacle Baptist Church. Said, the Tab. We go there for this and that, and we've had this event there and been to that event, been to a funeral there, and it's kind of a local landmark. It is the Tab. And there's a great case there for keeping the name.
Yes.
Because it's immediately identifiable. Actually, it's probably not serving your biblical theology in quite the way you'd want it to, but it's immediately identifiable, isn't it, as a local place. And actually, I think that's a good case for keeping a name, whereas you've kind of gone the other way, if you like. So tell us a bit more about what sort of steps practically have you had to think about when you come to changing a church name. So people might be listening to this, or they might be watching thinking, okay, I can see that our name isn't quite so helpful. And actually, there are other words like chapel that have started to have negative connotations. We could argue all day about whether evangelical is helpful or not. I think some of those old Hebrew words, who knows, Ebenezer's and things like that. But in terms of practicalities, what kind of stuff have you had to think about? If someone's thinking, oh, maybe we should change our name.
Well, it's a decision that you're aware that the whole church has to kind of make with you, because it's such a significant thing for everyone. It can't just be leadership saying, we're changing the name and it's happening and this is going to be the name. It's a process through which you're going to have to bring people with you. And so before you even mention to the church family about the thinking about changing the name, I would say as an eldership, are you united on thinking, actually, this is something we probably do need to move on? So we were, as an eldership, we'd kind of got to the point where...
So you could use up a lot of relational capital.
Right.
By changing something unnecessarily. You don't need to.
Right. Okay. That is helpful. Yeah. So as an eldership, do we want to change the name? And is it worth the pain for our mission and for serving our people? So that was the top level. But then secondly, to get the church on board with this, we wanted them to see some of the problems with the name. So as I said, we got them to do some research for us. With those questions, go and ask your friends and give us feedback so we can hear, are we changing something that we're going to lose a lot of capital off the back of in terms of our influence in the area and our knowability in the area. So we got them to do that work and feed in that work. Then we actually got the church family to suggest names.
Okay, interesting.
So to suggest names into us.
Churchy McChurchface. Isn't that what happens when you get people to suggest things? That someone says Boaty McBoatface is going to be there. Yeah.
Always. Yeah, I think we had
what was the outlier? I've got to ask this. Come on.
The Living River Church of God. I mean, I think we had some quite special ones that came in.
Is there a big river in Norwich?
Well, do you know, we're not far from the River Wensum.
Yeah, it's not that big though. I just walked over it. It's more like a canal, really.
That's right. It is more, but it's quite fun to paddleboard on.
Yeah.
So we did get people to feed in, but then actually...
So they felt part of the process.
Yeah, they were part of the process.
Nice.
But then actually, as a team, then we did bring in some other people within the church fellowship to help us sort of land on a name. So we didn't present to the church 3 names and we're going to vote on them.
Because then you get 30%, 30%, and then
it's just divide. Exactly. Yeah. It was just we could see that as being a recipe for division. Okay. So we really did take people's input, and then we did try out, some of these names on people in the church and say, well, what do you think about this? So we did get some feedback. We didn't do that in a big church members meeting, but then we, kind of landed on one of the names. Now we did get a designer in.
I was going to ask you about visual identity, because at this stage, what churches often do is they do all the hard work that you've done. And then what they do is they fire up word art.
Yes.
And they type in CityGates.
Yeah.
And they get a little bit of clip art to go with it.
Yeah.
But you've done a bit more than that.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we actually paid for a designer to... he was actually really significant in the process as well, because he was like, well, what do you... He actually gave us a list of 100 words. And he says, out of these 100 words, pick 10 words that sort of best define where you want to be as a church. What do you want the world to know about you as a church? And then he made us go down to 3 words, and that helped him with the design of what we were trying to present. And I think the words, do you know what?
When's the launch going to be, by the way?
So we're launching 5th, 6th of November, but we're doing 2 launches. We're doing a launch for the church family, where we will change the name, and actually we will change the website and all of that. And so that will be a sense of looking back, and we're going to have a day together, I think maybe up in Cromer, ironically. It's because we can't all fit in our building. But just to say thank you to the Lord for all that he has done for Surrey Chapel, as a chance for us to give thanks and also say, well, actually we are starting, but this is where we're going.
What we might do is we might put this podcast out after the change.
Right.
Because then we can put a link in the podcast, so people can see what you've done. So just come back to the design. That's interesting, because I think, let me just play and push back a little bit and sort of be the cautious conservative guardian.
Yes.
So so external designer.
Yeah.
How is that? I can see just about how changing the church name is a kind of a missional thing.
Yes.
How is design and visual identity important for a church? Isn't that just, isn't that just a waste of money?
No, it's so not a waste of money. Aesthetics.
Why?
Aesthetics matter.
Do they?
Yes.
Why do they matter?
Well, particularly, just look at your iPod, or not your iPod. We don't have an iPod anymore, do we? Look at your iPhone. It's our smartphones are things of beauty. They are not just practical tools.
Other iPhones. Other phones are available.
They are. But I guess the proliferation of smartphones, and smartphones being things of beauty that you enjoy holding and enjoy engaging with, it tells us something about our culture. And our culture, aesthetics matter. And I guess we really don't want to put people off the gospel before they actually hear it. And so one of the ways that they just, the visual identity of the logo, of the font that we use, it just all helps people to go, okay, this is a place that is not out of touch. It's connected with the sort of world I'm in, where I'm touching my lovely iPhone. I actually quite like the aesthetics of it. So I think aesthetics matter for our culture. It's obvious, it's all around us. And I mean, brand identity, that's an awful phrase, because but we want people to know that we are the church that ran the thing in the park. We ran a summer outreach. We had a tent and we were in the local park. We connected with loads of people in the community, and we want what the image they saw of our church there to be associated with the building they walked past. And so the logo, the aesthetics of that, if they can see something distinctive and they go, oh, that's the church that was there.
There's an immediate connection.
It's the connection. It's trying to connect up to get people through the door so they'll hear about Christ.
And just tell us, I just interrupted you. You were starting to say about what have you got planned for the church in order to kind of mark this moment? Yeah. So just talk us through some of those plans.
Well, I think there's two levels of what we want to do. So because we're aware that it's an emotionally big moment for the church.
Yeah.
And so there's a sense of both mourning and rejoicing, So we want to celebrate and say, thank you, Lord, for what you've done through the church as the name of Surrey Chapel. But also we want to say the church is not the name, it's the people. We're still here. That hasn't changed. And actually we can say, thank you, Lord, for that name. And Lord, please help use this new name as we seek to connect with the community around us and the mission we have. So there's a sense we've got a soft opening for the church. But then our plan is in March to go hard publicly, to do some events centrally in the church, to maybe go really hard with publicity, with local news and local press, and to have a weekend of events, maybe have inflatables in the building. I don't know, but just so we're trying to do it in two stages. One where we're going to try and say to the community, look, we are here. And if you want to hear about Christ, come. This is the place to come. But before we do that, we want a sense for the church family to be able to go.
So 100 years of being in the FIEC.
Yes.
Church is older than that though. When was the church formed?
1854. And can I say, Adrian, it started with the name, the Bazaar Chapel.
The Bazaar?
Yeah. And then, because it met near the Bazaar.
Oh, okay, as in the market.
Yeah, the market. And then the next name, you'll love this, was Ebenezer Chapel on Surrey Street. And then eventually it became Surrey Chapel. So this will be the fourth name of the church.
Ironically, it is an Ebenezer moment.
Right.
Thus far, the Lord has helped us.
Right.
It is raising up the stone and saying, we want to mark the fact, even though it is changing our name. Actually, the Lord's been with us this far since 1854.
Yeah.
He's still with us. He's still doing great things.
Yes.
It's great to rejoice in that. It's been great to talk to you, Andy, about church names. It might seem so inconsequential, but actually all these things contribute, don't they? To how the church is viewed and seen and how people engage with the church. They're not insignificant. They're not the gospel, but they're not insignificant, are they? So thanks for sharing with us. And thank you for joining us on Independence, the FIEC podcast. You can subscribe through all your normal channels. And if you like the podcast, please do like us as well. My name's Adrian Reynolds, the head of National Ministries, and Andy Rees. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.